China has introduced a new law that has sparked debate around the world. Chinese government says this law is designed to strengthen the national unity and promote development. Whereas critics say this law could have long-term consequences for the culture and language of the ethnic minorities group. Now this law, the law on promoting ethnic unity and progress, it came into effect on the 1st July 2026. And to understand why this law has become so controversial, first it is important to understand the China's ethnic diversity and historical context behind it. The Han Chinese make 90% of the country's population. The remaining 10% consists of minorities group Tibetan, Uyghur, Mongolia, Ningxia, Hui, and many others. Since the founding of People's Republic of China in 1949, China has described itself as a multi-ethnic nation. It created autonomous regions such as Tibet, Mongolia, Ningxia, Uyghur, and many others, where ethnic minorities were intended to have a degree of autonomy within the China's constitutional framework. According to Chinese government, these policies health, improve the infrastructure, healthcare, education, economic opportunities, cross-ethnic minorities, region. However, many scholars and human rights organizations across the world argue political decision-making remain highly centralized, and regional autonomy is more limited than the legal framework suggests. One of the best-known example is Tibet. 1950, after the occupation of Tibet, China government described this event as a peaceful liberation of Tibet, and they say it ended the feudal system while reunifying Tibet with the mother China. Tibetans and Tibetan government in exile in India, Central Tibetan administration, view this event differently. Tibet was an independent nation before 1950, and it was never part of China. That 1950 marks the beginning of Chinese rule over Tibet. Over the decades, China government has invested heavily in Tibet by building highway, railway, airports, school, hospitals, and many other infrastructures. The Chinese officials say this investment have helped improve the living standards of Tibetan peoples and reduce their poverty. But if you look into this matter deeply, you will understand that all these infrastructural development were made only for two reasons. First, to encourage the Han Chinese people from mainland China to move to Tibet, with the intention of overpopulating the Chinese people within the Tibetan areas, to eventually eradicate the Tibetan culture and use of Tibetan language. And since 1950, around 10.5 million Chinese people have moved to Tibet. From this data alone, we can say with the now Tibetans are minority in their own country, in their own region, on their own land. Now imagine this. Until yesterday, you will only have to use your own language to pay, to get a taxi to go to market, to buy groceries from the supermarket. And today, all of a sudden, you have no choice but to learn and speak in Mandarin. Why? Because the shopkeeper is now Chinese. And if you go get a taxi, the taxi driver is Chinese. This is you no option but to learn Mandarin Chinese. And with that tactic, the Chinese government aims to eradicate and demolish the Tibetan culture and language in a long run. And the second reason being that if you look on the Google map right now, you will see that the rural Tibetan areas previously used to be like a nomadic land for Tibetan people, has now turned into a modern, well-built infrastructure of cities or town. What if you gained some insight? You would realize all of this infrastructure was not developed for the welfare of Tibetan people in Tibet. It was to strengthen the China's military positioning against India. Most of the Tibetan who used to live here, around this region, were either forced to move to an urban area, or those remaining still has little or no access to these facilities. More than 2 million Tibetans were relocated, forcibly, from rural Tibetan areas to urban cities like Lhasa and Shigetse. The aim of China government was to build military camps around this area, and also to forcefully integrate the Tibetans with the majority Han cities. Also, restriction on Tibetan language, religion, and cultural expression have become tighter over the time. The United Nations and many human rights organizations across the world have expressed concern about the allegation of mass detention, extensive surveillance, lack of religious freedom, and forced labor inside Tibet. China has always strongly rejected all these allegations and maintained that its policies are counterterrorism measure and poverty reduction initiatives. This competing narratives continues to shape the international discussion about China's ethnic policies. Over the past decades, China's approach has increasingly emphasized what President Xi Jinping calls a shared sense of Chinese nation. China's leader argued that building a strong national identity helps maintain stability, reduce ethnic tension, and encourage equal development throughout the country. But this places greater pressure on the minority communities to assimilate into the majority culture. It is within this broader policy direction that the China New Ethnic Law was introduced. According to the Chinese government, the law aims to strengthen unity among all 56 recognized ethnic groups, improve development in minority regions, expand access to education and healthcare, and combats separatism, terrorism, and extremism. The law encourages school, government agencies, media organizations, businesses, and other public institutions to promote a shared Chinese national identity. It also gives greater priority to the Mandarin Chinese in education and in public life, while stating that the minority language should continue to remain protected and respected. One of the major concerns about this new law is that within this law, there are about 64 articles, and on the Article 63 of this law, it stated that the China may pursue legal responsibility against individuals or organizations outside the country if they are accused of encouraging separatism or undermining the ethnic unity. This extraterritorial provision has attracted a significant international attention. Since the law was passed, Tibetans community in India, in the United States, in United Nations, in Canada, in Europe, in Australia, and other places have raised their voices through peaceful protests and demonstration, public statement, conferences, petition, and advocacy campaigns. Entire Tibetan communities argue that this law could reduce the use of Tibetan language and places greater pressure on preserving Tibetan language, religion, and culture. Some Hutu and Mongolian advocacy organizations have also expressed a similar concern. Now the big question is, can this law be overturned? Because this is a domestic law enacted by the Chinese government, and no foreign government and international organization have the legal authority to repeal and invalidate it. However, governments can raise concerns through diplomatic channels. United Nations Human Rights Mechanism can review the China's human rights record and issue recommendations. Although these recommendations are not legally binding, human rights organizations, journalists, academics, diaspora communities can continue documenting developments and advocating for their policy changes. The Chinese government sees it as an important step towards the national unity, stability, and shared prosperity. Many critics, including Tibetans, Uyghur, and human rights organizations, believes that this law could put greater pressure on the minorities groups to assimilate into the majority culture, which would lead to a greater risk of losing their culture, language, and religion. After this law came into effect on the 1st July, Tibetans across the world have been raising concerns non-stop. And to a very disheartening news, one of our own brothers self-immolated right in front of the United Nations headquarters. He only seeks the global attentions towards the Tibet's issue for the freedom of Tibet. Now, this is not the first self-immolation cases in Tibetan protests against China's rule. So far, there has been more than 160 cases, even more if we include the unreported cases inside Tibet. Although many of our brother and sister are still suffering under the Chinese rule and choose to express their pain through burning themselves, our efforts are not met as expected. I have noticed the event of how Pawo Ramos is putting himself under the fire in front of UN, was not even covered by the major news channels in the United States, let alone by other news agencies across Europe. But on the other hand, that stage performance by the Russian couple on the Empire State Building went viral within hours. Now this makes me wonder as in which world we are actually living, because the world chose to accept this stage performance rather than to accept the real crisis in Tibet. Now let's all come together and pray for the power of Rangzen. His last words were, "I don't want you all to mourn for me. I need you all to continue our fight and struggle for the freedom of our great nation."